Welcome back to the Tour Today show. My name is Steve Fleck. Every day there is racing at the Tour. We will talk about the highs and the lows, the thrills and the spills, the tragedies and the triumphs at the Tour, aka La Grande Boucle. On each episode of the Tour Today, I'll have a special guest on with me. Today, I'm pleased to have with me one of the top marketers in the endurance sports business, be it working with brands such as Canyon and Hoka, events such as Steamboat Gravel, or teams such as the Northern Arizona Elite Running Team. Welcome, Peter Abraham.
Hi, Steve. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah, great to be with you. It's a busy time of the year. You were at an event with the Northern Arizona Elite Running Team last night. Tell us quickly about what that was all about. It's been an unusual year for all endurance sports. We'll get to the cycling and the Tour de France momentarily, but literally teams, clubs, whatever, they've had to invent their own meets and, challenges, haven't they?
Yeah. I mean, unlike cycling, which has been able to put on some professional races, at least in Europe, in running, there have been really no real big track meets, no Olympic trials, track meet, no marathons, no 10Ks. So the various teams have had to basically create their own events. And I was with the NAZ Elite team last night. We created our own event where we had 3 athletes going for the 1 hour record, which is a rarely run event, kind of old school and cool. And then 3 women going for 10K PRs, which they all achieved and was really exciting.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, thank you, everyone, for tuning in. This is the Tour Today with Steve Fleck. And if you do have any questions for me or my guest, probably the best place to reach me is via Twitter. You can find me at Steve Fleck. Peter, where can they find you?
On Twitter at Peter Abraham, or my website is abrhm.com.
Awesome. Well, let's talk, Peter, about the stage. It was 183. This is stage 5. It was 183 Ramble, a net downhill from the ski resort near Gap to the French town of Privas, which is where the finish was. Now, it was the finish was a little twisty and turny and lumpy, and they were expecting a bit of an unusual sort of outcome to the stage. Now, yesterday, I had predicted Wout van Aert would be the winner, and I hit the jackpot with that prediction, Peter, didn't I?
Yeah, that's a good prediction. I think that's a smart money call. He played it amazingly. Coming off the Sunweb lead-out train, basically, and coming around case full. I think for me, what was interesting, if you step back, is Jumbo-Visma is not only clearly the strongest team at the Tour in the mountains, but they have arguably the best all-around rider in cycling right now, Wout van Aert, who can win in a sprint as well. And that's something we just have not seen in recent history. I mean, you can't ever think of a time in the last 10 years when Sky was winning the Tour over, GC, and winning Sky or Ineos, and winning, sprints, maybe since Mark Cavendish was there anyway. So it's unusual and a show of force by that team.
I agree with you completely. I mean, usually the trend the last few years is the teams that have been contending for GC have been all in for the GC, and they really couldn't care less about the sprint stages or all around or messing it up in that particular way, unless it's just getting the rider to the 3 kilometer to go banner, which we did see a bit of hurly-burly today with the teams trying to get their respective GC riders past that 3 kilometers to go mark. And the reason, as you know, Peter, for that level of importance is on stages like today, everyone will get the same time.
Yeah, that's right. And there's been some controversy around that. I mean, some feel that it just, as it went from, there was no, distance cut off before the finish. Everybody had to finish together. Then it was 1K. Now it was 3K. Is it just pushing it back? I know. I heard Simon Gerrans talking this morning about how some teams have just, they don't even try and get their sprinters to the front until after 3K, because all the GC teams are trying to be in front until 3K to go. And then they all relax and kind of step aside. So in some ways, the early part of the sprint lead out has become maybe less chaotic and it only happens at the very end without all the GC teams. Also, I think what you're seeing is, I think, the end of the traditional lead out train. You see a lot of sprinters winning now. Caleb Ewan, Wout van Aert today, they don't have a lead out train. And I think that era of cycling is kind of fading.
Yeah. It's almost just watching these last couple of stages and that 3 kilometer to go banner. It's almost more manic trying to get to that point with the GC teams mixing it
Yes,
up with the sprint
correct.
teams. Everyone's battling for position, and then it kind of backs off, and then the sprint
Exactly.
teams, come more to the fore,
Yes,
and it's actually settles down a bit, and it's a bit more routine sort of after that point.
that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
I would agree with that.
So the stage wasn't without controversy, and the yellow jersey holder, Julian Alaphilippe, was administered a 20-second fine after the stage was concluded for taking an illegal feeding. Apparently, it was a bottle hand up that he took at 17 kilometers. I don't know if it was from a vehicle or it was from the side of the road, but apparently that is not allowed after the 20 kilometer to go banner. He was assessed a 20-second fine, which bumps him back to 16th place, I think. So 20 seconds off his time. He'll go to 16th place. So Adam Yates will inherit the yellow jersey by that fine that was put on Julian Alaphilippe. Thoughts on that, Peter?
It's unfortunate. I guess you'd have to place the blame on the team for either placing a soigneur on the side of the road with a bottle or handing up a bottle out of a car. I also thought about how difficult that must have been for the Tour de France officials to take arguably the most popular French
Yep.
cyclist out of the yellow jersey at the most popular French race. Like, that was a big move for them.
Gutsy move on the commissaires to make to
Yeah,
make
yeah.
that call. We'll talk a bit more about stage 6, but tomorrow, but in a few seconds. But it could prove to be another upset on the GC. In fact, Adam Yates in post stage interviews today was saying he was targeting that stage anyways to make a go at the yellow jersey. So he's in the yellow jersey one day early. Shifting over to the green jersey, Sam Bennett, it looks like it's going to be back and forth. Peter Sagan's not going to have this easily. His journey for the record-breaking 8th green jersey. Sam Bennett, on account of a great finish, he ended up second behind the fast finishing Wout van Aert on the stage, actually third. So Cees Bowles from Sunweb was second, but Bennett got enough points at the intermediary points and then beat Sagan across the finish line. So he will take over the green jersey tomorrow. Sagan back in second, and Alexander Kristoff sitting in third in green. In white, the outstanding young super Slovenian, just 21 years old, Taj Pogacar, he will stay in white. Benoit Cosnefroy, an uneventful day for him in the KOM. And great to see the EF cycling team, Peter, moving up in the team standings. They got to wear the yellow helmets today and the yellow bib numbers, indicating that they are the leading team on time.
Yeah, I'm a fan of EF as sort of an American managed team and with some Americans. So I think it's great to see, and their Colombians are just really strong.
Yeah.
And I think Rigoberto Urán has really come around, and he's sort of on the same time with most of the leaders now, which is impressive. And he made the front group yesterday. On the green jersey, I think it's interesting that Peter Sagan is just clearly not at the level he was a couple years ago and before. And this happens often with sprinters. It's fast twitch muscles. As they approach 30, they just are not the same. And I think you could make a case for Peter Sagan kind of trying to switch gears and become almost a GC rider, because otherwise what he is kind of relegated to is like trying to get a bunch of 5th places in sprints in like 12 different stages to win the green jersey. But it's just not a very exciting way to win the green jersey. Sam Bennett is clearly a stronger sprinter, and he can get over hills. So I wouldn't be surprised if Sam Bennett stays in the green jersey for the rest of the way.
Yeah, Sagan's been in there, but it's almost, I don't know if it's a combination of fitness or just poor choices and strategies. He's been caught in traffic the 2 times or 3 times that he's contended for a final field sprint, and just hasn't seemed to been able to maneuver around. So, and that's unusual for him because he's known for his inherent savviness and being able to maneuver in the hurly-burly of a final push to the finish line. So you could be, I was thinking this tour was going to be unusual from the get-go, simply because there's been so little racing. Like, this is the first major bout of racing that a lot of these guys have done. There was only a few World Tour events before. The Criterium de Dauphiné was the only real significant stage race that they'd raced. So I was from the get-go expecting unusual and extraordinary outcomes to pretty much everything about this tour. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many interesting little things that I hadn't anticipated. Like I heard yesterday somebody comment on that the direction of the light is different. Usually you're used to early July, the sunlight is straight overhead, and now it's late. They said, yeah, it's more like Vuelta sunlight, later
Yeah.
and a higher angle. And I thought that was an interesting way to look at it. Very few crowds on the side of the road. There's not this narrow tunnel to get through on the climbs with all the crazy crowds and everyone wearing masks and the interviews off the bike. Like, there's so many things about it that just make it different, not to mention all the training issues that you brought up. Like, how are people doing after being just on their own for 5 months before they even got to racing, and then right into all these big races? It's the Tour, the Giro, the Vuelta right after each other, World Championships spread in there, classics in there. It's all this like 8 months of racing compressed into 90 days. And we've never seen anything like it.
Good summary of that. So let's switch to tomorrow. It's mostly flat to start out. The sprint points, intermediate sprints come up just past 120 kilometers, and then it's a pretty stiff climb to the finish at Mont Aiguille. They'll start at Le Thiel, which is a small village that they went through en route to Privas today. So they'll go backwards a little bit before going forwards on the road. And that's tomorrow. It's going to be a straight uphill to the finish, another mountaintop finish, and could be, as I mentioned earlier, Peter, another shakeup in the GC.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can count on Jumbo-Visma taking it to everyone, putting their team on the front, starting with maybe Tony Martin, then Wout van Aert, then Robert Gesink, then George Bennett, then Sepp Kuss, then Primoz Roglic left at the finish. It's like stages of a rocket. Nobody can match that team. I don't necessarily, on one hand, I would say Roglic would not be concerned with getting the yellow jersey, but I think one thing that is on people's minds this tour is that, like, what if 3 or 4 teams got pulled out one day because they all got, the virus? And if for any reason the whole plug got pulled on the race, who's going to be left standing? You don't want to be left without a chair when the music stops. And so I think there's not going to be that, I'm not going to worry about the yellow jersey till the last week. I think teams are going to be worried about it earlier, like we saw last year at the Tour when Geraint Thomas might have gotten it back from Egan Bernal, but then that last stage was canceled. And the winner was determined right there without actually finishing the race. And so I think, it's going to be more competitive for the yellow jersey earlier in the race.
Awesome. Let's shift more to your deeper level of expertise in the business and marketing and the sports marketing in endurance sports. You mentioned this, you touched on this just moments ago, Peter, the pressure to get this cycling season going. The ASO, the organizers of the big races, the Grand Tours, Giro d'Italia, the Vuelta, and the various other World Tour events, apparently we're getting tremendous pressure. The UCI was from the teams to get some kind of race season going, because a lot of the teams on the bottom half, of the World Tour rankings, if there was no racing, they would have gone bankrupt. And particularly the Tour de France. With no Tour de France, they were saying, we're going to be out of business before the end of the year.
Yeah, Steve, I've been looking at that closely, and I'm trying to understand, like, what businesses the main team sponsors are in. And it's fascinating to think about. There are teams sponsored by travel businesses. Obviously, travel is in trouble now and is going to be in trouble for a while. So you look at like Sunweb, that's like holidays to Spain. EF, educational travel. EF is slightly different. That's not a sponsor. They own the team. Mm-hmm. Sunweb is a sponsor. Sunweb is signing riders for, the next few seasons. So I guess they're okay. I'm looking at teams sponsored by energy, because energy stocks have taken a beating, although they're coming back a little bit. But Total Direct Energy, INEOS is a huge energy and chemical business, and I find it interesting to understand how those businesses are going to be able to justify a big cycling sponsorship at all. And then you have a season like this where half the races are canceled. And yes, the situation is potentially dire. I mean, already we've seen CCC, which is a Polish shoe retail chain. They've announced that their women's team is going to continue. I'm not sure that the men's team is going to continue, but I know they've been looking for a new sponsor. I mean, it's really rough out there for a sport like this. And on top of that, the teams get no revenue sharing from the tour. I mean, the business model of cycling is so broken in so many ways that there's just no business model for owning a team. Like, you get some money for sponsors, every dime of that is spent on staff and travel and rider salaries, and it's just, there's no sustainable business model.
That revenue sharing is critical when you look at the other professional sports, be it football, soccer, North American football, hockey, baseball, etc. That revenue sharing coming from the TV rights is critical to not just the league success, but individual team success. And I've always been fascinated in cycling. There's not something similar set up.
Yeah, I mean, and that you take a sport like any, English Premier League or the NFL. Like, you look at the NFL; those teams make about $500 million a year each between television. There's ticket sales. There's individual sponsorships. There's all kinds of ways for them to monetize that team. And in cycling, there are no revenue streams outside of, please sponsor, give me money. That's it. And I think it's very, it's very difficult.
And it seems crazy that teams are so desperate that it's the breakaway or it's the podium shot that, like, their whole bonus structure is set up on that.
I know.
That's nuts.
I know. And there are some teams when they've run into hard times or lost a sponsor, I've encouraged them to do a crowdfunding campaign. I think, Axel Merckx, the owner of the Action Hagen's Berman, U23 team, I encouraged him in a DM the other day to do a crowdfunding campaign for his team, because he went public that they are, their sponsorship is declining and he's not sure whether he can continue. And I think the whole model needs to be rethought. And I think right now, even on how, for instance, bicycle brands or how many brands think about what they get out of a cycling team, which is if it's a really big brand, it's maybe like Fox with Sky, with Team Sky, or Ineos, it's like impressions. If it's like a bike brand like Trek Segafredo, it's maybe more based on, can we sell product? Yep. And I think the model needs to be rethought into, can the team be a vehicle for us to build a community around our business? And I think EF has done a really good job with that, how they've, with Rafa in particular, handling so much of the, the content around the team. They've done these great films. They're sending riders out to do gravel events. And I think that is a more evolved way to think about what a professional cycling team could be.
Jonathan Vaughters has been, a team director that has historically always thought sort of outside the box. And yeah. I credit him with a lot of the, the more innovative things that teams have been doing historically, over the course of time. What are some of the good things that you've seen Vaughters and the EF Education First team, doing to sort of, bring their sponsorship, full value?
Well, he looks at sponsorship in a different way than many other teams. So, like I was just talking about, there are different angles on sponsorship and there are different objectives. So some things I like what Jonathan Vaughters has done. He was really early to the anti-doping game. I mean, he was explicitly anti-doping way before many other people in pro cycling were. Like, he was very open and forward about it, and has written about it. He wrote a very good op-ed piece in the New York Times about his experience with doping. He wrote a book about it. So I thought that was great, number one. Number two, he is solving for different variables in terms of sponsorship, how he runs the team, and the kind of riders he signs than, say, DeKooning Quick-Step. DeKooning Quick-Step is 100% all they care about are winning races and stages, not GC stage races, but winning one day, crossing the line first. The whole team is built around that. Those are the kind of riders they sign. You look at Julian Alaphilippe, you look at Sam Bennett, and they have historically, that's how they've operated. Vaughters he's not solving for that. He's finding riders who are trying to share their journey and be open with the world and inspire the world with what they do. They're storytellers. Their storytelling is very good. I mean, just the EF daily tour kind of update article is very, very good. It's graphically very slick. They're making videos. So I think they're solving for different variables than a lot of other teams, and I like that.
And I've noticed they've this might get a little controversial, but we're in this age of diversity. I mean, they have one of the first that I'm aware of Indigenous North Americans, riding for the EF First Education team, Nelson Paulus, and that's been brought forward as being sort of innovative, and particularly in this year and this age of pushing diversity forward. We need to be thinking about that kind of thing all the time.
Yeah, that is great. I would call that a good start, but I think there's so much more that can be done. I'm really looking forward to more diversity and inclusion in cycling generally. I mean, it's traditionally been such a white sport, and I know in my discussions with a lot of different events with USA Cycling, that is probably the single biggest opportunity in cycling right now, is to diversify more African Americans, more Latinos, more women in particular. I mean, you go out on a typical group ride, and in LA where I live, like the big group rides, there'll be 100 riders, there'll be 5 women out of 100. Yeah. It just should not be. Could be so much better. And so I think that the first thing is for cycling to realize it can be more diverse, and then to really start feeding the grassroots with more diversity. And NICA, the high school mountain bike league in the United States, which is in 30 states and about 30,000 kids right now, it's booming. I would call it the largest grassroots cycling program in the world.
That's a huge program. Huge
program. And it's already fundamentally changing on a global landscape competitive cycling, because some of those kids are good. Yep. Some of them keep going. Some, so you look at junior world champion Quinn Simmons, who was second at the Tour of Hungary today. He's only 19 years old. He's going to be a full-on classic star, I guarantee you. Women's junior world champion Megan Jastrab.
Yep.
And Kate Courtney, world mountain bike champion, they all came through the NICA system. Yep. And so we're just seeing the beginning of that. If you fast forward 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, when there are 50,000, 100,000 kids of all different colors and races and diversities, it's really going to be amazing.
And it's great that that's a high school based, program, Peter, in the public schools, because it reaches sort of like all kids at all levels, and hopefully all sort of levels of income, and that diversity mix that we're talking about. And, you keep doing that over the course of 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and you will, increase that diversity, and, get lots of kids turned on to cycling. It's a win-win-win, type of thing.
That's right. I started racing bikes in high school, and I can only imagine, I was like this freak weirdo shaving his legs in high school, and everybody else was playing basketball and football. They didn't even know what planet was I. What are you doing? And I can only imagine.
It's like breaking away all over.
Exactly. And I can only imagine if I'd have had a high school bicycle racing team. It would have been so extraordinary for me. And I know so many people have shared that with me. And in fact, I'm going out on Sunday here in LA riding socially distant with a big group of junior racers and a NICA team. And I'm so excited to just get out there with them and feel that energy. And I think having had kids who went through high school sports myself, what works about NICA is mountain biking in particular is fun. Hey, we can get air. Hey, there are jumps. Hey, there. And so
Yeah.
I think like that is a shiny object attraction device that gets kids into bikes. And then from there, they can experiment in all different kinds of cycling, including non-competitive, but is a great attraction device. It's social. It's really built around fun first, competition second. And so I think it's just tremendous. I love everything about it.
Yeah, great stuff there. Just more on Jonathan Vaughters, and this is more about participation, and where the fans come from, in North America at Interbike. This is back when Interbike was actually running.
Yeah.
Jonathan Vaughters was on a panel. I went to one of the sort of the panels and they were talking about the future, of professional bike racing, in the US, in North America. And Vaughters was saying that, for the sport to really thrive at a number of levels beyond what we're talking about, is that there need to be some, linkage between the mass participation, types of events, Grand Fondo style events, charity ride types of events, and the professional races. And we've seen professional races in the US and in Canada almost disappear. And I still haven't seen that linkage yet. I still haven't seen that inclusion of the mass participation, types of events, in the Tour of California or, the other races that are going on. Is that something that's legitimate that needs to happen?
Well, I would say it is happening, and it's called gravel. And so I
Yeah.
think if you go to the gravel events, I mean, it's absolutely that business model, like a marathon that Jonathan Waters is talking about. You have pros at the front and anybody at any level in the back. It's just like running a marathon. Like you go run the New York Marathon, there's the world record holder or the Olympic gold medalist up ahead of you. You're running on the same route. You have the same closed roads, but you could run anywhere behind them that you feel comfortable with. But you can still push yourself and still compete against, trying to hit a time or within your age group. And gravel is very much like that.
Yeah.
And I think what you're seeing is, yes, you're right. And I've written about this a lot on my blog, is traditional bike racing is absolutely declining for a number of reasons. Number one is that it's very hard to get people into traditional road racing. The kind of first step is a very high bar, even like a Cat 5 local criterion. I mean, if you just show up and watch that, they're going fast, they're inches apart, they're bad crashes, like it's very intimidating.
Yep.
Number two, there's no business model for race directors. So like if you manage a marathon, as I have, hey man, you can get thousands of participants, because of that, you can get sponsors, you can have an expo. There are a lot of ways that you can make your money back and maybe even keep a little bit for yourself and have elites there and amateurs and everything. Traditional road racing here is a tiny group of people at a race. So one of the biggest stage races in Southern California that just went out of business last year was called the San Dimas Road Race. It's a 3-day road race. It's great. It was a time trial, a road race, and a criterium. Well, logistically, that's 3 days of racing. That's cops, that's safety vehicles, that's barricades. I mean, there's so much operational expense that has to go into putting on that race. Meanwhile, they had a grand total of 450 participants paying maybe $150 each. Maybe get a few sponsors, but that's not worth much for a sponsor because they got 450 people, not 4,500.
Right.
So like their overall budget is like under $100,000, and they got to put on a hugely complicated 3-day event. Yeah. It just doesn't pencil out. And so with gravel, you could have 1,000, 2,000, and because you're on dirt and off-road, there's fewer cops required and so forth, no road closures. And while there are, fondos, like Phil Guyman's fondo out here is excellent, the fondos, you're mostly out on open roads. So it doesn't feel that much different than your everyday ride. Like you're kind of having to deal with cars going by you, and I think it just doesn't feel as much like an experience as a gravel event where you're there for a whole weekend. It's very similar to like going to Chicago or New York or Boston Marathon the weekend, and you go to the expo and you go to some events and there's an after party and you're wearing the gravel weekends feel more like an experience.
There it is. The future is gravel.
Yeah, it really is. And there's still, I think there's 3 years of growth in gravel, and you're going to see, younger people getting into gravel as they come out of Nike. I mean, I think it's bigger than people realize.
Well, everything got put on hold this year, so we'll see where that growth in gravel and all levels of cycling goes in future years. You have been watching the Tour Today show. My guest today has been Peter Abraham. Peter, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Good to have you. My guest tomorrow for Stage 6 of the Tour Today show will be Rob Jones, the co-founder of Canadian Cyclist and one of the top professional photographers working in the sport of cycling in the world. I'm Steve Fleck on behalf of the team at Endurance Zone TV. Thank you for watching. We will see you all back tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time for the Tour Today show.